Step out of the vehicle now." Her 8-year-old daughter screamed in the back seat as the trooper yanked her door open. "I just dropped her off at school. I work here," the woman cried, still in her medical scrubs. The officer's gun never wavered. "You match the description. You're under arrest." There was no description, no call, no crime. Only a black nurse in the wrong zip code, and a badge that decided her fate. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. It was 7:46 a.m. when Shondra Bell turned onto Brookline Avenue, heading toward Roosevelt Elementary. Her daughter, Mila, sat in the back seat humming to herself, her pink lunchbox resting in her lap. Shondra wore navy blue scrubs, hair pulled tight under a cap, badge clipped to her collar. She was a registered trauma nurse at St. Mary's Medical Center, and she had 10 minutes before her shift. As she pulled up to the curb, she kissed Mila on the cheek. "Love you, baby. Text me when you're in." "Love you too, Mommy." The door shut. Mila walked toward the school steps. That was the last peaceful second of Shondra's day. Blue lights flashed behind her. A highway patrol vehicle, too large, too aggressive for a residential block. She glanced at her mirror. No siren. No announcement. Then the speaker blared. "Step out of the vehicle." She rolled down her window, heart pounding. "Officer, what's this about?" The trooper was already walking toward her, hand on his weapon. White. Mid-40s. Dark sunglasses. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. I just dropped my daughter off. I'm on my way to work." His voice sharpened. "You're refusing?" "I'm asking for a reason." He didn't answer. Instead, he yanked open her door. Mila turned at the top of the steps. "Saw everything, Mommy." The officer reached for his cuffs. "You match the description of a suspect in a child abduction call. You're being detained." Shondra froze. "My daughter goes to this school. You can ask her." He pulled her from the seat. Her stethoscope fell to the asphalt. "You can explain it downtown. Please don't do this in front of my child." Mila screamed. Teachers rushed over. Phones came out. None of it mattered. Within 4 minutes, Shondra was on the sidewalk, face against the hood, wrists in plastic cuffs. Another officer arrived. Younger. Black. Hesitant. "That's Ms. Bell. She's a nurse. She lives up the block." The trooper didn't blink. "Her car matches the call." The second officer checked his phone. "There is no call. Dispatch says no active alerts in this sector." Silence. Shondra looked up from the hood. "Am I free to go?" The trooper didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the younger officer. "Secure her vehicle. Impound it for search." "On what charge?" The older man didn't blink. "Suspicion. That's enough." Mila was crying now, clinging to her teacher. Shondra's voice cracked. "Someone tell my daughter I didn't do anything." But the cuffs stayed on, and the law stayed silent. 9:28 a.m. Shondra Bell sat in the back of a patrol car, wrists still marked from the cuffs. She'd been read no rights. She'd been shown no warrant. She'd only been told one thing. "You match the report." But no one showed her the report. At the station, they took her lanyard, her phone, her hospital badge. The intake officer, a heavy-set man with an expression like drywall, printed her fingers and said flatly, "Until we verify custody, you're listed as unconfirmed guardian." "That's my daughter. Her name is Mila Bell. She's registered at Roosevelt Elementary. Call the school." "That's not procedure." "Then call my job. I was on my way to St. Mary's. My supervisor can vouch for me." The man didn't look up. "We don't verify alibis during intake." He handed her a form. "Sit tight. Someone'll call you." But no one called, and Mila was still at school, alone. Back at Roosevelt Elementary, Mila sat in the nurse's office holding a juice box she hadn't opened. Her teacher, Ms. Calloway, crouched beside her. "Mila, sweetie, do you have any other family we can call?" The girl didn't answer. Calloway stood and called the number listed as emergency contact. No answer. The voicemail still played Shondra's voice. No one else was listed. No aunt. No father. No backup. The school counselor joined them. "We may need to notify CPS. If we can't reach the parent." Calloway lowered her voice. "She is the parent." The counselor nodded sadly. "But if custody hasn't been confirmed?" Calloway shook her head. "That girl's been dropped off every morning at 7:45 sharp. Same car. Same lunchbox. Same hug." She paused. "This is not a kidnapping." The counselor folded her arms. "Then why's the mother in handcuffs?" Calloway didn't have an answer. At 11:12 a.m., Shondra was finally brought into a gray interview room. 2 detectives entered, both white. No one introduced themselves. The older one spoke first. We need to talk about the girl in your car. Shondra leaned forward. That's my daughter. I've raised her alone for 8 years. Her name is Mila. Look at the school records. Look at my insurance. She's on my policy. The younger detective flipped through a folder. We have a report that you were observed pulling a child toward a vehicle against her will. No license plate captured. No audio. But your vehicle type and color matched the tip. Shondra's mouth dropped. That's not true. She walked to the car. On her own. There were teachers outside. Do you know who made the report? She blinked. No. A resident across the street. Said he saw a suspicious woman dragging a girl into a dark sedan. Dragging? Her voice cracked. So now a mother walks her kid to school and it's kidnapping? The detective didn't answer. He just wrote something down, then slid a paper across the table. Sign this. It confirms we read you your rights and explained the situation. Shondra looked at it. You didn't read me anything. That's why we're explaining it now. She stared at the paper and finally understood. This wasn't about truth. It was about paperwork. 1:46 p.m. Shondra sat in a holding room with no clock and no answers. No lawyer had been provided. Her phone was still in a plastic bag behind the desk. She didn't even know what day her daughter would sleep in her own bed again. A uniformed officer finally re-entered, holding a clipboard. Miss Bell, the Department of Child Services has filed a temporary protection order for the minor. Shondra stood abruptly. What are you talking about? The child has been placed under state care until legal guardianship is confirmed. You mean foster care? That's not the term we use. Where is she? Where's my daughter? The officer looked away. You can file an emergency motion with the court. They'll assign a review date within 48 hours. Shondra's voice broke. You're punishing a mother for dropping her kid off at school. The officer said nothing, then added quietly. You're not under arrest. You're free to go. But the car's impounded. You'll need to arrange pickup. Outside, Memphis heat wrapped her like a punishment. She had no car. No ID. They hadn't returned her wallet. No phone. No one to call. She walked 6 blocks to St. Mary's, hoping someone there had a heart. At the security desk, a receptionist blinked. You've missed 2 shifts. Shondra nodded. I need help. They took Mila. I was profiled outside the school. I need a phone. I need someone to verify I'm her mother. The receptionist made a call. 10 minutes later, her supervisor, Clarissa, came down. White. Sharp suit. Tight tone. Shondra, what happened? She told her everything. Clarissa blinked once, then said, You should go home. HR will reach out tomorrow. Until this is resolved, I suggest you take personal leave. You mean unpaid? I mean we need to evaluate risk. This has created optics. Shondra didn't scream, didn't beg, just turned and walked out. Now she had no daughter, no car, and no job. That night, she stayed on a friend's couch, holding a blanket Mila had used last week. The scent was fading. She couldn't sleep, couldn't stop thinking of the phrase. Temporary protection order. As if she were the threat. At 2:14 a.m., she sat up and opened an old laptop. Started searching every line of Tennessee's Child Protective Code. She found one clause, one opening. Section 37-1-116, Immediate Reunification Petition. Filed within 24 hours. Requires notarized proof of custody history and written challenge to the initial removal. It was something. It was thin, but it was hers. And if no one else was going to fight, she would. 8:41 a.m. Shondra stood outside the courthouse with a folded petition in her hands. She hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten. But she had typed the entire emergency motion herself, with references, dates, and a signed statement from Mila's pediatrician confirming parental history. The clerk at the filing window barely looked up. Petition for immediate reunification? Yes. You'll get a docket number within 2 business days. Judge will assign a date. Shondra frowned. The code says 24 hours. The clerk shrugged. Depends on calendar. Could be today. Could be Monday. Shondra leaned in. You took my child. I haven't even seen her face since Friday morning. You're telling me to wait? The clerk tapped a button. I'm telling you how it works. She handed over a small receipt. Docket hashtag A5294. Next. At 12:23 p.m., a call came in. A block number. She picked up. Ms. Bell, this is Officer Keene with Child Services. Your petition's been flagged for expedited review. You've been placed on the 4 p.m. calendar today. Shondra nearly collapsed. But then he added. However, The agency has submitted a stability concern request. The judge may delay reunification pending your housing and employment status. Shondra froze. I have housing, and I had a job until your officer got me fired. That's not in our record. Do you have verification? I'll bring it. He hesitated. Ms. Bell, if you raise your voice in court or appear emotionally unstable, the judge may side with caution. Caution against what? Loving my child? The line went dead. 3:59 p.m. Courtroom 6B. Shondra stood in borrowed clothes with shaking hands. The CPS representative wore a navy dress and a patient smile. The judge, gray hair, short glasses, read the file slowly. Then said, Ms. Bell, this request was well prepared. However, the state has submitted an objection citing employment loss and recent behavioral volatility. Shondra stepped forward. I lost my job because I was profiled and detained for nothing. The CPS lawyer chimed in. Respectfully, Your Honor, the agency has no access to police rationale. We can only act on what was reported. Which was false, Shondra snapped. The judge raised a hand. Ms. Bell, please. One at a time. She stepped back. The judge turned a page. I'm placing this matter under 72-hour review. If documentation of stable housing and new employment is submitted, I will schedule a follow-up hearing for possible reunification. Shondra blinked. So she stays in foster care? Until I have more. He banged the gavel. Court is adjourned. Outside, Shondra sat on the courthouse steps. She had done everything right. Filed on time. Spoke calmly. Dressed neatly. And the system still told her. Not enough. She stared at her hands. Not in defeat, but in calculation. She had 3 days. And no one else was coming. So she'd build a case stronger than any foster file ever could. The next morning began with a copy machine. Shondra stood in a corner store on the edge of downtown, feeding coins into a dusty copier while printouts spilled into her tote bag. She had no lawyer, no printer, no scanner, just a battered laptop, public Wi-Fi, and 15 years of being her own everything. She copied Mila's birth certificate, her own hospital ID badge history, immunization records listing her as guardian, school enrollment forms, photos of every doctor visit, each one signed Mother, Shondra Bell. By noon, she had 42 pages. And one plan. She walked 5 blocks to the county health department. Asked for Mila's neonatal file. Was denied. Then cited the Freedom of Information Act and asked again. They hesitated. She kept pushing. Finally, one clerk, tired and possibly sympathetic, handed her a sealed envelope. Inside, the blood work from Mila's birth. It listed Shondra as maternal source. Blood type, O negative. Same as hers. Same as the proof she now held in her palm. At 4:37 p.m., she filed a new petition. Motion to produce biogenetic verification evidence. Attached matching blood types, vaccination sign-offs, and 2 notarized affidavits from former pediatric nurses confirming maternal history. No emotion. No story. Just evidence. Cold. Legal. Traceable. The clerk read the top page twice. Who's representing you? No one. You wrote this? Yes. He stamped it. Then muttered. You missed her calling. She didn't smile. Back at her friend's apartment, Shondra sat at the table with her hands around a mug she hadn't touched. Her friend, April, tried to comfort her. Maybe you should go public. Post about it. Make noise. Shondra shook her head. I don't want pity. I want precedent. April blinked. You sound like a lawyer. Shondra didn't look up. I sound like a mother who knows how to read. The next morning, her phone, finally returned, buzzed with a call from the court. The motion had been accepted. The judge had issued a request for CPS to respond within 48 hours. They were now required to explain why a child whose hospital files, blood type, and medical history all matched her mother's name had been taken without cross-verification. The case wasn't over. But the ground had shifted. And for the first time, CPS wasn't silent. They were on record. At 8:12 p.m., as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Shondra reread her motion. She hadn't won. Not yet. But she had built something more powerful than emotion. She had built doubt. And doubt, in court, was a weapon. Monday, 9:03 a.m. Courtroom 4C. Shondra stood beside the clerk's bench as Judge Rennick flipped through the growing file on his desk. Behind him, the CPS attorney, Langley, now visibly less confident. A week ago, they didn't know her name. Now they were whispering it in hallways. The judge cleared his throat. Ms. Bell, your latest motion raises a serious procedural question. According to your records, your daughter's immunizations were signed under your legal authority 6 months ago. Langley stepped forward. Your Honor, we don't dispute that. However, verification protocols are based on intake reports. The officers involved described noncompliance. The judge didn't blink. I'm looking at a pediatric entry from St. Mary's dated January 12th. Same name. Same mother. Same signature. He paused. But this document wasn't included in your agency's review file. Langley shifted. That may have been an oversight. Shondra finally spoke. It wasn't. You left it out because it disproves your entire basis for removal. The judge held up the record. What concerns me more is that the CPS transfer form is dated January 10th, 2 days before this confirmation was signed. Langley's eyes widened. Shondra stepped forward. You processed custody without checking a clinic database 2 miles away. The room fell silent. Judge Rennick leaned back slowly. I am issuing a formal inquiry into documentation procedures. In the meantime, this case is now in review escalation. Langley opened her mouth. Your Honor, we advise caution. No. What I advise is that you bring complete files next time. He turned to Shondra. Submit a housing stability letter and any updated employment information by Friday. If approved, I will rule on physical custody next week. Bang. Court adjourned. Outside, Shondra didn't speak. Her friend April waited on the bench. What happened? Shondra handed her a paper. April read it twice. Escalation to evidentiary hearing. That's good, right? Shondra didn't answer. Just stared down the courthouse steps. They lied on a timestamp. That's how I win. April shrugged. Sometimes a lie is all they need. Now you made it matter. That night, Shondra logged into her old cloud account. She hadn't opened it in months. Inside, scanned copies of Mila's first hospital discharge papers. Each one signed, time-stamped, and location-stamped. She smiled bitterly. I documented everything, she whispered. She didn't think she'd ever need it. But now it was the only reason anyone was listening. At 11:58 p.m., she drafted her final motion. Petition to dismiss state custody claim on grounds of procedural error and identity confirmation. She didn't cry, didn't exhale. She just typed. Because if the law couldn't see her heart, it would see her records. Wednesday, 1:02 p.m. Evidentiary hearing. Courtroom 2A. Shondra sat at the left table. Alone. No legal counsel. Across from her, CPS attorney Langley, flanked by a state-appointed caseworker and an observing administrator, who said nothing but kept a pen ready. Judge Rennick opened the session. Today's hearing concerns the procedural legitimacy of the child custody claim filed against Ms. Shondra Bell. The petitioner may begin. Langley stood. Your Honor, the state acted in good faith on the information provided by law enforcement. A report described suspicious behavior involving a minor and a vehicle. The child was temporarily removed pending investigation. She turned slightly toward Shondra. This is about caution, not accusation. Shondra rose. Then why did your officers say I was unverified? Why did they file a transfer before checking a clinic database? Why is my employment, my child's enrollment, and every signed medical record in my name? Langley interrupted. We don't deny the child is hers now. But guardianship requires current stability. Ms. Bell lost her job, has no registered co-parent, and provided no alternate pickup contact. Shondra stepped closer. You created the instability. I was fired after being detained without cause. My daughter was taken based on a neighbor's bias. And no one ever showed me a warrant. She paused, then added, calmly, I'm not here to make you feel bad. I'm here because the law protects due process. And you skipped it. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Bell, can you summarize your evidence? She lifted a folder. Signed immunization records. Pediatric affidavits. Birth certificate. Housing confirmation. Employment rehire letter from St. Mary's, effective next week. And a statement from Roosevelt Elementary verifying consistent drop-off by me for the last 2 years. She placed it on the table. Page 19 is the timestamp error. The judge flipped through the folder, then stopped. This is well organized. Langley spoke up. Your Honor, I request time to review the employment letter. We've not seen this before. The judge shook his head. You had your chance. He looked at Shondra. You're articulate, precise, and calm. Shondra met his gaze. Because if I wasn't, I'd be called unstable. He nodded once, then turned to the clerk. Final review is set for Friday. If all documentation holds, I will issue a custody reinstatement order. Langley stiffened. Pending home inspection? He looked at her coldly. You had 8 days for that. You didn't go. You assumed she wouldn't fight. Bang. Adjourned. Outside, Shondra didn't smile. Didn't even sit down. She walked. Not with victory, but with momentum. For the first time since they took Mila, the law had spoken back and hadn't called her alleged. Thursday, 7:42 a.m. A knock on the apartment door. Shondra opened it still in her robe, expecting mail. Instead, 2 people in windbreakers. One was a woman in her 30s, stern, clipboard in hand. The other, silent, male, holding a tablet. Ms. Bell, we're here for your home inspection. CPS Compliance Division. Shondra blinked. This wasn't scheduled. The woman gave a rehearsed smile. Surprise visits are permitted under Section 8 to 220, Subarticle F. Shondra stood aside. You have 5 minutes. The inspector stepped in. Please confirm all appliances are operational. Where will the child sleep? Shondra pointed silently to the clean, folded bed by the wall. The woman checked off a box. Any pets? Firearms? Controlled substances? No. No. And no. The man tapped the screen without looking up. Then the woman turned. Ms. Bell, how do you respond to the emotional trauma this process has created for the child? Shondra's jaw tensed. She's 8. She cried herself to sleep in a stranger's house. What do you think? The woman made a note. So you're angry. I'm prepared. Pause. Would you say you've managed your emotions consistently throughout the investigation? Shondra looked her dead in the eye. I didn't scream when they handcuffed me. I didn't threaten when they lied about my job. I didn't cry in court. So I guess, yes. The inspector didn't respond. She marked one final line, then turned to leave. You'll receive a copy of the compliance report by noon. No handshake. No apology. Just the closing of a file. At 12:07 p.m., a PDF arrived in her inbox. Compliance inspection. Passed. Reunification recommended. It didn't say sorry. It didn't say mistake. Just status cleared. Shondra forwarded it directly to Judge Rennick's clerk with one line. All requested documentation now submitted. Ready for ruling. That night, she stood in Mila's room, freshly made. Clean pillow. Old teddy bear. One night light plugged in. She sat on the edge of the bed. Not to cry, but to wait. Because tomorrow, a judge would decide if facts weighed more than fear. 10:31 p.m. A text from April lit up the screen. You didn't yell. So they listened. Shondra stared at the words, then typed back. They didn't listen. They read. Friday, 9:56 a.m. Courtroom 3B. Judge Rennick entered without preamble. He did not smile, did not greet. Just opened the file before him and adjusted his glasses. This court has reviewed all submitted evidence related to the custody proceedings regarding minor Mila Bell. No one else spoke. Langley was present, arms folded, expression unreadable. Shondra sat alone, palms flat on the table. The judge continued. The petitioner has failed to justify continued separation based on current records. Immunization logs, birth certificate, employment reactivation, and housing compliance all support legal maternal custody. A pause. Further, the state's documentation was found to contain procedural inconsistencies, including premature transfer filing and omission of verified data. Langley stiffened. Your Honor, if I may. The judge raised a hand. No further argument. This is a ruling, not a debate. He looked at Shondra. Ms. Bell, effective immediately, full legal custody of your daughter is reinstated. Shondra didn't blink, didn't move, just listened. A written order will be delivered within 24 hours. The child is to be released from state care by 6 p.m. today. Bang. Gavel. Decision. Closure. Sort of. Outside, April met her with wide eyes. That's it. Shondra nodded. That's it. No apology? No statement? Courts don't apologize. They withdraw. For 42 p.m., a plain sedan pulled up outside April's apartment. No CPS badge. Just a manila envelope and a soft knock. Shondra opened the door. The caseworker barely made eye contact. He handed over the envelope. Custody transfer confirmation. She's in the back. And then, a small figure stepped out. Hair braided. Eyes wide. Backpack clutched like armor. Mommy? Shondra crouched. Baby. I'm here. Mila ran. No hesitation. The hug lasted forever. The caseworker cleared his throat. We'll close the file Monday. Technically, we need one more check-in. Shondra didn't respond. Just closed the door in his face. That night, she made Mila's favorite dinner, boxed mac and cheese and frozen peas. They ate on the couch, watched old cartoons. Mila leaned against her. Did I do something wrong? Shondra's voice didn't waver. You did everything right. Then why did they take me? Shondra looked her daughter in the eyes. Because they didn't know what right looked like. Later, once Mila was asleep, Shondra sat at her laptop, opened a blank document. At the top, she typed, How the System Forgets Black Mothers, a case study. She wasn't writing for pity. She was writing for record. And for every woman who wouldn't get her day in court. Saturday, 6:18 a.m. The apartment was still. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in soft strips across the floor. Shondra stood at the kitchen sink, hands wrapped around a coffee mug gone cold. She hadn't slept much. Not from fear, but from relief she didn't quite know how to hold. Behind her, Mila stirred on the couch, blanket pulled to her chin, breathing steady. Home. Not just a word. A fact. By noon, Shondra had filled out 3 forms. Petition to seal the CPS file. Motion for state expungement of wrongful detention. Request for employment reinstatement certification. Not out of vengeance. Out of record. Because even when you survive the system, it documents you forever, unless you erase it first. At 2:11 p.m., her phone buzzed with a message from April. You gonna tell your story? Shondra stared at the screen. Typed. Not just mine. Later that night, she opened the file again. How the System Forgets Black Mothers, a case study. She had written 17 pages already. Citations, court codes, quotes from her own transcripts. But the first sentence still sat alone at the top. I was not unstable. I was unheard. She read it once, then twice, and didn't change a word. At 9:03 p.m., Mila tiptoed into the kitchen. Mommy? What is it? Baby? Can I sleep with you tonight? Shondra smiled. Always. They curled up under the covers. Mila's breath slowed. Her fingers found Shondra's. No nightmares. Just warmth. Just presence. Just her mother. And somewhere, buried in a government archive, a case file still existed. Bell, Shondra. Custody dispute. Closed. No apology. No correction. But one line at the bottom, barely visible in fine print. Custody restored by court order. Mother self-represented. And that was all she ever needed. Because they tried to reduce her to a number. But she answered back with pages. And when no one else stood up, she documented her way home.